Fugazis. Today we are talking fakes. Let's do it. And we're back here chatting with John P. Today we are talking fake watches. I'm not going to tell you too much my opinion on them, but what we're going to focus on today is how to spot a fake watch. Now, fake watches are about as old as watches themselves. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but nonetheless, fake watches have been produced for such a long time. Now, fake watches are very good, and by fakes, I mean a watch that is made to be an exact model or use a brand name that it shouldn't. For example, a fake Rolex Submariner, a fake Omega Speedmaster, something with a brand name that is trademarked. Homages, in my opinion, are not in the same category. That's another discussion for another time. So what we focus on here is how to spot a fake watch, like a fake Rolex or a fake Omega. But first, like and subscribe. I do appreciate it, and leave in the comments below things you'd like to see. This is actually directly from a question that someone put in one of the videos. I won't say who or why, but that's where it's from. And actually, I gotta tell you something. I'm a little bit sad today, so if I seem down in the dumps, it is because I dropped my vintage Speedmaster. I have a 1970 Speedmaster. If you watch the channel, you've seen it. If you're new to the channel, you haven't seen it. But here's a picture, and basically I dropped the Speedmaster off of my counter, and a Speedmaster has a Hesalite crystal. It should have been able to take the impact, but it just didn't. So for whatever reason, it cracked. I'm a little bit down, but got another chronograph, Brigade Type 20 on the wrist. Love this thing. I don't want to drop this. It's a little bit more expensive to fix this thing up, and that brings me into if this happens to you, reach out. DelRayWatch.com service department. We will take care of your babies. Not your actual babies, because I hate children. Just kidding. We'll take care of your watches. DelRayWatch.com service center. Okay, guys. Fake watches. Now, once again, fake watches, like a fake Rolex, fake Omega, not talking homages here or watches that look like a particular model. We're talking direct knockoff, replicas, rip-offs of watches. Now, depending on the watch model and depending on the replica and the quality, keep in mind there's varying qualities and levels of quality with replicas or fakes. They can be very good. And the thing is also, when we're considering different models, there's different things you have to look at, right? Like with certain Omegas, you look at the feet. I won't go into it. It's a whole other video, but you can look at the way that the feet on the Omega logo are, and that indicates a fake depending on if the logo is applied or it's not applied. That one gets very deep, as well as some Rolex ones. So basically, today this is going to be a high-level view of quick things that someone that's casual in watches or new to watches can look at to spot a fake very quickly. Now, let's get into the list, because I know that's what you're here for, right? Number one, the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that the model is real. If you're not a watch collector, or maybe you're kind of new to watches, or, you admit you're a casual watch wearer, but you don't want to get duped, make sure the watch model is real. There are so many replicas, especially junky, just crap replicas or fakes, that are just not real models. The dial colors will be different, the bezels will be different. Make sure the model is real. Take the reference number if you're questioning it. Google the reference number, or Yahoo, if for some reason you're using Yahoo, I don't know. Look it up on a search engine and see if the model is real. If you can't find the model, or the model looks totally different than the reference number that's on the case, it is undoubtedly a fake. The model doesn't exist. It's a fake watch. No, you definitely don't have some kind of super secret rare, edition made for a movie or something like that. You don't have one of those. You have a fake watch. So that's the first thing. Make sure that the model is a real model. The next one on my list here. Okay, now this can be a little bit difficult, but it's a telltale sign of a fake. If you're new to watches, this will be a difficult one to gauge. But if you've been around a while, you need to feel the quality. Now, there's a couple things with the quality of the watch, and the first thing you need to do is, if you have the ability, compare it to another reputable brand in modern times. For example, if you're looking and you have in your hands a Speedmaster and you think it might be a replica, but you also own an Omega Seamaster from roughly the same time period, compare the material, feel the bracelet. Does the bracelet feel like kind of clinky and cheap? Older watches had kind of cheap feeling bracelets and clinky, so like prior to 35 years ago or 30 years ago, depending on the watch, they were a little clinky. But if you have a watch that you Googled it, you did the first step, you took my first advice, you Googled the reference, that checks out, and then it just feels like a cheap watch and it's supposed to be a Rolex, but you know, it's a model from the last 5 years, you probably have a fake. Now, that's just the next step in line, but the other thing to keep in mind is if it's supposed to be a precious metal watch, let's say a Rolex, presidential date, and it's supposed to be a gold watch, and the watch is actually not gold, you definitely have a fake. So look for the stampings, right? Precious metal watches are supposed to have stampings on them that kind of denote it being a gold watch, or, you know, other precious metals have other stampings, and this is a jewelry thing. So look for the stampings, and also don't be afraid to buy a picture here of a, don't buy the picture, buy the actual kit, but buy a metal testing kit. You can get these things for $12 US on Amazon, and you basically dump some acid on this little plate that you rub off some of the metal from the watch, and it will tell you right away what the precious metal is. You have to go through a few acids. It's not that simple, but in about 5 or 10 minutes, you can tell. And I think that's pretty quick to determine whether or not a precious metal watch is fake or not. It's very rare to see a fake watch actually constructed of precious metals. So if you're buying a Patek or you're buying a Vacheron or something that typically isn't precious metals, or a Rolex for that matter, a precious metal gold Rolex, if you just do the acid test, because, you know, that's the probably the easiest thing to do, I mean, either way you have gold. And now, sure, there's some higher end replicas that also use gold, but I mean, you can quickly disqualify something by using a quick step like that. So keep that in mind. Do the acid test. Next, imperfections on the dial. Okay, we're talking high-end watches here, guys. These watches they take sometimes thousands of hours to produce. These are expensive items. There should not be serious imperfections on the dial. Now, I'm not talking about scrutinizing the watches through, like, you know, special macro lenses or microscopes or any of that kind of thing. I'm just talking about simply looking at the watch, maybe looking with a very, like, low-level magnifying glass, okay, at the most. If you can see serious imperfections, the logos are not centered, indices are not lining up, the bezel is not aligned with the markers, in the case of like a Submariner or something like that, a Rolex Submariner, you probably have a fake, or possibly a watch that has been worked on a little bit by a watchmaker and not the best taken care of, or maybe it's older. But if it's a watch from the last 20, 30 years, for sure, like a modern Rolex, and stuff's not aligning, the logo's a little off, it doesn't look crisp or clear, that's another sign that you could have a fake. And so when you start, by the way, when you start pairing these things in the list, you start pairing up 1, 2, 3 different things together, you're building a stronger case for maybe you have a replica. And so, you know, without having a trained eye, this is probably the best thing you can do besides bringing it into a professional. Start building a case for yourself, start checking off these items if you think it's a replica, and you may have one. So keep that in mind. Definitely keep the imperfection thing in mind. I mean, high-end manufacturers are not releasing trash. Let's keep that in mind. So, okay, this is a good one. And this is an easy one. It should have been further up on the list. If you have a watch that's supposed to be an automatic watch, you know, it's supposed to, wind itself with the swinging movement of your arm, if you're not familiar, if you're new to watches. But it has a battery, quartz movement, that's a fake watch. Absolutely a fake watch, right? If the watch says automatic on it, but you have to get a battery replaced, or like you read someone in like an eBay listing that says, just had battery replaced on my Rolex Datejust, okay, unless it says oyster quartz on the dial, which is a very specific exclusion for this, you have a fake watch. And this is a telltale sign of a cheap fake watch, right? When you get into higher end fake watches, it gets a little more difficult, but if you can disqualify it again right off the bat, and for those of you that are new Hopefully this is helpful. For those of you that have been around for a while, this is obviously, a no-brainer, but nonetheless, it's something to keep in mind and add it to the list, but there's no exceptions. If you have a quartz battery movement in a watch that says automatic, you have a fake watch. That's it. Next item. Compare the movement shots and the decoration. Now, this is going to help you with the higher end replicas, okay? So in the watch industry, there's a lot of money, right? There is a lot of money in trickery and foolery. It's something to keep in mind. And it's just like the art world, right? There's fakes, there's counterfeits. If you're familiar with the art world, this kind of thing also happens. And that's why they have people that do authentication processes, right? That's why there's dealers, there's people that specialize in it, because it requires specialization when you start talking about the highest degree here. And so when we look at the highest degree or the highest quality replica watches, they usually still fall short in some pretty big ways, and that the main way is that the movements are just not decorated right. If you have a real watch and you have, let's say, an FP Journe or a Patek or a Vacheron, a manufacturer that really takes care of polishing and hand working their movements, if there's no decoration on the movement, you either have a very specific example that's old, or it's probably a fake watch. I mean, depending on the manufacturer. I mean, if you have a very old Patek where the movement was never supposed to be seen, I don't know, it might look pretty bad to the naked eye, to someone untrained. But if we're talking a new Patek or a modern Patek last 20 years, or any of these other manufacturers that I mentioned, I'm sorry, you have a fake watch. Now, when you talk about decorations of movements and how the movements are finished and polished, there's all types of things we could talk about, like angling and bevels, and a lot of metalworking goes into creating and making these movements look nice. And so if you have a movement shot, so if there's a movement shot, you have a display case back, or perhaps for whatever reason that there's a picture of the case back open, or maybe you have the watch, right? Maybe you have the watch and you can see it in real life. Look at your movement that you have and look at a picture of a known good movement. Now, I say this in all my videos, and it's the easiest way to tell what you have, right? Go to Google image search, and type in movement shot, Patek, whatever, and put the model in and look at the movement it's supposed to have and look at the movement you have. And there's all other websites that kind of catalog these movements as well. There's a website called Watchbase, okay? Watchbase. And it's, I think it's based out of Europe, and it's a company that basically just spends all day with a room full of 5 people cataloging watch brands' movements and how they should look and all the specs about them. Go there, look up your movement, look what the movement's supposed to look like, and compare it to yours. If it doesn't look the same and the reference number is the same, you need to look closer. You need to look at some of these items on the list, and perhaps you need to consult with a professional like myself at delraywatch.com or anyone else that you trust. So if everything else in this list, checks off, but for some reason the movement looks a little bit different, do not be afraid to ask for help. You can go on the forums. Unfortunately, sometimes the forums, they get a little bit skittish talking about fakes and replicas because they don't like that kind of stigma that comes with it. But definitely reach out to someone that you trust, and they can help you when you have a fake that is unfortunately very well manufactured. So lastly, I want to leave you with a couple of other telltale signs for Rolex, right? I mean, Rolex is a very popular brand. Many of you collect Rolex. I like Rolex. Rolex is a brand that is very hot right now, and for those of you that are new to watch collecting, or perhaps you're a casual wearer, you're not really like the biggest watch buff, you probably want to know about some telltale signs how to spot a fake Rolex or a replica Rolex. So I'll give you a couple signs here because these are helpful for you. If you're in the watch world for a long time, you probably know these, but if not, check it out. So after around the year 2004, 2005, I think it was, depending on the model, Rolex started etching a crown or, their logo into the crystal towards the near bottom of the watch at around the 6 o'clock. And you're not supposed to be able to see it clearly. You're supposed to have to either use a loupe or shine some light on it or look very closely. And now that's debated depending on your eyesight, but nonetheless, at the 6 o'clock, it'll have a picture here. It should be very difficult to see this, but you should be able to see this if you try hard enough. So if it's just too clear, like if this etching on the crystal is too clear, that oftentimes means that someone over-engineered a replica watch and they're trying to pass it off, because people Google this, they look up tips, and they really want you to see that, you know, that coronet as they call it there. But unfortunately, that probably means it's over-engineered and it's too good, right? So if it's too good, it's probably a replica or perhaps an aftermarket crystal. I mean, we're getting into the nitty-gritty here, so it's difficult, but that's something to keep in mind. Also, around you know, the rehaut, it should say Rolex. So the rehaut is the inside metal piece that surrounds the inside of the case on the outside edges of the dial, underneath the crystal of the face of the watch. Now, I know that's a big mouthful, but nonetheless, it's basically, you know, the ring, on the metal ring on the inside of the watch, and you should be able to see, you know, the words Rolex and also the serial number on it. So match up the serial number between the serials on the lugs. I'm going quickly here, I know, but my battery's actually going to die. So anyway, look on the inside of the watch. They call it the rehaut. It should say Rolex. It should say the serial number. Look between the lugs on the Rolex watch. Look for the serial number. Match it up. If it matches, that's good. It's not always 100% real. It could be a super replica, as they call it, but that's a pretty good sign. So if you don't see that there, it's a newer watch model. Decent chance that something is wrong there. Have that looked at. Yeah. That pretty much classifies it. There's some other things I have on my list here, but I'm going to save that for more particular videos, like a video on how to spot a fake Omega. There's some things to look for, as well as maybe I'll do a Rolex video. Specifically, there's a lot more things that we can look at, but really here, and leave in the comments below if you guys would like me to do a more specific how to spot a fake video on particular brands. There are some different tricks and tips, and you know, I could really go on all day, because here's the thing, guys. I mean, it really is a bit of a battlefield in the watch industry, and in modern day machining and technology, there's some really good ones. Hopefully this video was helpful if you're new to watches, and hopefully it was a good refresher for those of you that have been around a while or just never really had to go through, you know, the process of scrutinizing a watch. If you always buy from a dealer, it can be, you know, almost pointless to know these things, but very helpful nonetheless, just for peace of mind. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I do appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Ciao.